Maybe you're going to struggle every single day of your life with the situation that you have. Maybe you wouldn't yell at your kids, but do you gossip at all the girls? Okay? Maybe you wouldn't wear those things, but it's so true. It's like, what do people say about Christians? You're so judgmental. As we progress in our relationship with Christ, our lives will change. And now, instead of judging, when you believe the Bible and the Bible alone, I said, that's what we live for, is just amen. Welcome to those of you that are watching us online, Roku, apps, any way you found us. We are glad you're watching. We are in part 2 of our guest speaker series, Suicide Survivor with Kristen Anderson. Forgot to bring your book up once again. Oh, here it is. She has a book called Life in Spite of Me, Extraordinary Hope After a Fatal Choice. So we heard her story in part 1, so if you want to hear that, go back to part 1 first. Today we're going to be doing part 2, which is a question and answer. So we've got lots of questions from the audience, lots of questions from me that I've been bombarding her with for the last 2 days. So we'll just start in with that. We'll start with a couple of the questions. Did I give you our website? If you don't know, if you want our website, it's womensbiblestudy.com. There you go, I keep forgetting. Now you have a ministry. Your website is what?
Reachingyou.org.
Reachingyou.org. So that's a place where can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can contact me there. There's a contact form. You can donate there. You can volunteer there. You can get links to videos that I've done and other things that are all through the website.
Because I know somebody has already talked to me about they really want to work with suicide. And so I was super excited for you. I need to get you guys together at some point. Okay, let's ask some questions here. So you got married, had a child. Now I'm going to ask you a couple questions that I asked you the very first thing. Prosthetic legs.
Prosthetic legs. Okay, so I am not walking on my prosthetics right now. I still have hope for doing that in the future. The biggest reason that I haven't been able to is because of pregnancy and because I have a 2-year-old. And I'm just much quicker in my wheelchair. When I walk with my prosthetics, I need to use forearm crutches. So when he was a baby, I couldn't have walked and carried him at the same time. But when I'm in my wheelchair, I can. And so life is just a lot easier with my wheelchair right now. I'm much quicker. And I'm hoping I'll be able to use my prosthetics still when he's a little bit older, at least around the house. And there's also pain related with it, so I need to figure that out.
So there's a lot of pain going. They just have a hard time fitting right?
Right. So I obviously got off of all my pain meds. I have chronic pain, but I'm able to handle that without all my meds. But when I put my legs on, it's another level of pain, and I just don't know if I really need to pray about it, but I don't know if I can handle wearing my legs and being in extra pain. Right. When I, want to be kind to people and everything too, so.
I'm right there. If I have a headache, it's like, that's nothing compared to that. You got married, you walked down the aisle.
I did.
Is that right?
That was a big dream of mine. When I was in the hospital, actually, one of the things my dad said to me was that he was going to walk me down the aisle someday. And I always just dreamed of doing that with my prosthetics somehow. For a long time, many, many years, I wasn't walking in my prosthetics, and I was like always planning, no matter what, I would walk down the aisle with my prosthetics. And so I did that, and I walked down the aisle to Amazing Grace.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
There were a lot of tears.
I bet so. Okay, I want to talk first. Oh, well, first, this is my big question, stupid question. I get this. I could not figure out how she was laying on the train tracks, and that was something that bothered me because I kept saying, so you told me that your head was inside the tracks.
My head and most of my body was between the tracks, and my legs were hanging over.
So just your legs were hanging over.
And I just never thought about how I'd sit, stand, lay, or anything. That's just what I did. And
this was my thinking this morning as I was getting ready. It was kind of a moment thought. Like, it wasn't like a lot of people planned suicide out for a long time, and you didn't. And I want to give hope to some people here have loved ones. We actually would get emails before we had the series. Is this series going to be good for someone who their wife just committed suicide or whatever? And I think, and I want you to speak to that for a second, because I feel like a lot of times suicide isn't something you plan for. A lot of times it is, and I think there's hope for the people that are left behind to know, it was just a moment that they just felt, overwhelmed. So what are
Yeah,
your
I think
thoughts?
for anyone, it's not what they really, really, really want to do. It's just it's just a choice that they make. Like we all make bad choices from time to time. It's just a very bad, desperate choice that you make in a very sad, desperate moment. And it's not something, it's not like you want to hurt your family. It's not like you want to leave your family. You just want your life to be a little bit better. You want to love yourself and love your world and the people around you to the fullest. And sometimes when you're stuck in a depression, it's just hard to see yourself and the world and the people around you the way that God does.
Right. Now, when you told your parents, you never told them about the rape.
Right.
Okay, so that was something they had no idea. So your mom, I think to this day, probably feels a little guilty, like maybe she didn't help you, because that's when you said that, like my mom doesn't like this part about it. But what do you do for someone here that maybe someone in their family has committed suicide, but they feel guilty, like I should have done more, I should have known more? Like how do you help them?
I've tried to work through this with my parents because they've struggled with blaming themselves for what I did, and I can't imagine what it would be like if I would have actually died. But I know that it wasn't their fault at all. I really take full responsibility. I don't think there's anything they could have done, honestly, to help me any more than they did. And so I just encourage people, to trust that they did everything that they could do, to trust that this wasn't something that they could have changed, and that person, it's hard to say that, but that person is fully responsible for what they did. It's not something that any of us can take responsibility for. And I think as parents, that's very, very hard, because as my mom says, you want to protect your children, you want to, keep them from anything that will harm them. But God doesn't want you to live with condemnation, in your life and on your shoulders like that. Satan wants to use that to hold you back and to hold you down and to convince you of things that aren't true. So it's important to focus on what is true and not, what Satan wants to use to bring us down.
Lots of moms here. So let's say our child is depressed. What do we do? Like, where do we find, like, do we take them to a psychologist? Do we take them to church? I know as most of us are Christians, and we're like, we just need to pray more for them. We need to meet with a youth pastor. Well, I get that, because I know God can clearly heal people. But sometimes we need to do something like go get them on medicine or go get them to a doctor. So speak to that.
One of the things I say, first of all, is if your child is threatening suicide, or if they have a plan, if it's that serious, then it's very important to get them to the hospital or call 911. If they're struggling with depression, it's important that you understand the signs of depression so that you know how bad they're doing. One of the things that I always say parents should ask their kids is ask them how much hope they have. When I was in the hospital, a lot of times I was asked what my pain was on a scale of 1 to 10. And when I was a teenager, I could have never told you that I was depressed. I didn't realize that I was suicidal. But if you would have asked me how much hope I had on a scale of 1 to 10, I probably would have said 1, maybe 2 at the best, and that would have been a very clear sign. Another thing I encourage parents to do is to be very good listeners. As parents, we are very good at talking and teaching our kids, but they really, really, really need to know that you care and that you're going to listen. The more that you listen, the more that you learn, the more that you can help them in a much better way. And it's important for you to model a relationship with God before them. I thought that my mom was perfect. I thought that she just had it all together, and I didn't. I thought I could, I remember asking her once, Mom, how do you do it? And she was like, I don't know, you just do it, And I was like, I can't just do it. I'm not good enough. I'm not strong enough. I don't know what it is, but I can't just do that. And she has said since that she didn't realize that God was like carrying her. And I wish that growing up I would have seen somebody who had a relationship with God, who was leaning on Him, who was putting their trust in Him, who was spending time with Him every day, who was asking Him for forgiveness, asking Him for strength, asking Him for comfort. And I think it's important for your kids to see what that looks like, because that's what you were created for. That's what they were created for. And without that, you're kind of spinning your wheels and something is always missing. So I encourage parents to model that, very openly before their children. And don't be afraid to see a counselor. I especially recommend Christian counseling because that was really, really, really helpful for me. But don't be afraid of that, and don't be afraid of medicine. For me, it was really important for me to take medicine for a number of years because I just really wasn't ready to deal with all of the emotional trauma. I had to recover physically. I had to kind of get adjusted to my life in a wheelchair. And so I really think that medicine can be a blessing for the right people in the right circumstances.
Depression is a tough thing. There's a lot of people that feel so hopeless. And pointing them to Christ is so important, but it's like what you were talking about. You always believed that you were a Christian just because you went to church. And that's why I'm so excited about our next series, because it's like, we need to know what it means, like you said, to really be a follower of Christ. What does that even mean? You know, because it's a different thing than I just go to church. And it sounds like you never were modeled. You were just modeled, let's just go to church. You never were modeled, like, you need to be in the Word. And I loved what you said about depression. Like, I got out of my depression went this way when I pushed forward into God. And not just like, oh, I'm just going to church. But you really, what did you do? Open the Word, talk about what you did to get out of that depression.
Well, what I started to do as I started going back to church, and I found a really good church where people were really living for God. We really
there's a
knew
key.
Him.
Find a really good church, teaches the Bible, that loves God, that knows what that means. Okay.
And I started volunteering. I got involved really in every way that I could. I started volunteering with the high school youth group. I was doing Sunday school with preschoolers. I was going to the young adults group where there were people my own age who were living for the Lord, and I got in a small group. I started reading my Bible way more than I ever had before, and those were the things that really helped me start to grow.
That's really important, because I hear from a lot of people on Facebook. They'll Facebook me and they'll say, I'm miserable, I don't want to live anymore, I don't know what to do. And I always tell them, go do something. Like, go do what you did. Go get involved in a church. Go volunteer. And I hear back, no, I don't want to do that. Well, I don't know how to make that better. You're not going to get better if you don't step out and actually do something.
Yeah.
And so that's a good...
One of the things I learned is that isolation breeds depression. So the more you keep people out here and the more you stay in your house, the more depressed you're going to feel.
I stay a lot of time in my house. Maybe I'm depressed. I need to check into that. Okay, we talked about this yesterday. Some people will come up and you're still in a wheelchair. Even though you are a Christian, how do you? Their question always is, how do you live in peace and how do you live in joy, knowing what you did, but now you can be really joyful and you're okay with it?
Well, the question I get asked a lot is, I still don't have my legs. Like, how can I live with, how do I have joy and peace in midst of, like, the consequences of my sin every single day, the way it affects me, the way it affects my life with my family and my children. And that can be really hard, but what I try to focus on is what is true about myself, how God sees me. He sees me as beautiful, He sees me as whole. And one of the things I remember all the time, especially in relation to my children, is if I still had my legs, yes, I could still run around with them and chase them and whatever else, but there is so much more I can teach them now that I don't have my legs because of what I've learned. And that brings me a lot of peace and a lot of joy. I understand, that God is using it in ways that I could have never planned. And I keep my eyes on eternity. I realize that this is not the end. This is not my home. This is not going to be forever. In heaven, I will have my legs back. So I just make the most of everything that I can here, every opportunity, every relationship, every day. I make sure that I spend time outside. I make sure I spend time with God, that I surround myself with people who know Him, who love Him, who can encourage me in my faith, who can challenge me in my faith, who will hold me accountable. And the more that I focus on what is true, what is real, what is good, what is right, the more I have that peace, because me not having my legs doesn't define my value to this world.
Absolutely. Now let's go back to the whole. Well, first I want to talk about the conductor. You said one in your book, I think it was, that one of the conductors or somebody came up to you a couple years later and said that anybody being run over a train is automatically sucked up into it. And that was the most powerful part to your book to me, because it was just a reminder when you said you felt like there was a hand holding you down, because that's not normal, I don't think.
No, obviously that's not normal. After I started speaking, I started having like train engineers and conductors and people come up to me on many occasions and tell me how amazed they were that I survived, and how what should have happened to me, basically because of how fast the train was going over me, how many train cars went over me, and how I was positioned beneath it. They have all said I should have been torn to pieces, and they've seen it many times before, but that isn't what happened to me, and I think it's because God was holding me down like that. I know that he was there.
Does anyone watch Chicago Fire in here? No one watched Chicago Fire. Some people are just embarrassed to raise their hand. Yeah, I get it. Okay. Oh, I didn't realize you were in Chicago, and so when you were saying that, I was like, oh, I could just picture like fire truck. What are they, 51 or something? I could think Severides. Coming to the rescue. I could picture the whole thing, but I'm sure that wasn't how it worked. But whatever. Okay. What else do we want to talk about? I guess I need to get this thing squared away first. Depression. Do you struggle with it now?
Okay, so I think that I am always at like high risk for falling into a depression again, and thinking that way is actually very helpful for me because it keeps me on guard. One of my mistakes during the early years when I was depressed is I just kind of waited for it to go away. I wasn't fighting it, and I did not realize that Satan was trying to destroy my life. I didn't realize, that the more God wants to use you, the more Satan's going to try to destroy your life so God can't use you. I just felt like it was all me. And so now I'm very, very, very careful where I let my thoughts go, what I let myself believe about myself, about my life, about the people around me, where I let my feelings go even. When I get depressed, maybe I'll let myself feel that way for a day or so, but as much as I can help it, I make sure I get out of the mud puddle and I move on with my life as best as I can. So I'm very careful because it's a slippery slope and I don't ever want to be in that deep, dark place ever again. So I make sure, that I'm in God's word and that I'm around people who can notice, who care about me enough to tell me if they think, I'm going down that road. And I thankfully have never struggled as much as I used to for a long time now.
Right. Now, you became a Christian, and you said you spent three years basically in and out of the psych ward. You were still kind of a mess. What was that turning point for you?
When you still kind of a mess.
It's like, what'd you say?
You were still kind of a mess. It was funny.
Yeah. In the most loving, Jesus loves you way. Pretty sure. So I meant that. But you were on a lot of meds. You still were in and out of the, you know what I mean? But I think that because I asked you this yesterday, what was that one turning point where you said, okay, I can't do this the rest of my life?
Okay, so the very last time I was in the psych ward, I was old enough that I had to be within the adult unit. And there are people there who live there, who are heavily medicated, who are mumbling to themselves, who are drooling. And I just had this moment of awareness where I realized if I didn't do something differently, I was going to be one of those people. I didn't want to end up living in a psych ward, 40 years old, heavily medicated, not able to enjoy my life, live my life, and be somebody that I knew I was supposed to be. So that was a big, big, big turning point for me. And after I got out of my time in the psych unit, I had occupational therapy where I had to go every single day. Not occupational, outpatient therapy. And I had to go every single day. And one of the things we had to do was art therapy, and I drew my road to recovery. And when I started to think about all the things that people had told me, all the things that I thought would help me, they were all things that would lead me closer to the Lord. And so I wrote, go back to church, and I drew a little picture of a church and get involved with other people who really believe and know God. I had a lot of different things on there, go back to school, and that was, really, really a big turning point for me when I realized, I couldn't just be passive anymore, or worse things were going to happen.
That is a great word for people. It really is, because so many people get into that whole isolation, depressed, I'm miserable, I'm never getting out. But I think it's a choice. It's like success in anything we talked about last week is a choice. But you got to get up and do something. And I think that's kind of really important. What was Limit's question? How did you meet your husband?
Okay, so my husband was in a 2-year pastoral program at the time, and he had just finished. He was looking for ministries that he could get involved with and volunteer with. And so he read an article from a time that I was speaking in his area. He went to our website and asked if he could volunteer. And he was about 2.5 hours from where we were headquartered. He started coming to some of our volunteer meetings because we had a fundraiser at the time, and he just started helping with everything. And that was sort of the way to my heart, because we always need more volunteers and more funding, and he was helping with everything. So I spent a lot of time with him, and I got to become really good friends with him, and that's how we started dating and how we met.
Sorry, my daughter's saying something. My hair is wet.
No, you're good now.
She's over there making like faces at me, so I heard, that's awesome, although I have no idea what you just said. Because apparently I'm more worried about my hair than I am your life, okay? Are we good to go now? So okay, perfect. Okay, how you met your husband, that's awesome. I did hear the story yesterday, so that's cute. No. Okay, sorry. You're going to be so glad to go back home to the W state, whatever that is, okay?
The W.
All right, what's another one? How do you deal with negativity? This is kind of a big deal, because every day I turn on the news, like I went through this, I would say depression, weird thing last week where everything just seemed so sad. I just felt sad. Every time I turn on the news, I just shake my head and be like, this world, stupid, you know. How do you deal, because there's a lot of that going on, and then you have, you know, the whole, I'm in a wheelchair, and, you know, but you do it really good. Like, you handle that thing good. She drives, too, by the way. You have a special car?
Hand controls.
Hey, that's so amazing. That was our other question. But you just, for your negativity, you just focus on the Word and focus on eternity, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of what I do. And one of the things the Bible says is to have peace, present your requests to God, and he will give you a peace that surpasses all understanding. And that's when I see stuff on the news, and when I am worried about my kids. I have 2 stepchildren. One is almost 15 and one is 12. So we're in the beginning of high school, beginning of junior high. We worry about them a lot, but the more that I pray about it and just kind of leave it at the foot of the cross, the better that I feel. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I don't feel it, but I know that giving it to him is what is helpful. I know the more I dwell on things, the more I worry, the more I think about things, the more I spin out of control, the more I'm not helping the people around me, and the less I'm growing. So.
Right. Okay, that's awesome. Somebody wanted to let you know that they read your book, and because of it, it inspired them to be baptized. So they actually went to church and got baptized. So that was kind of super exciting.
Yeah.
Someone wanted to know, will you raise your son the same way you were raised? And if not, what would you do different?
Okay, so my parents were amazing in so many ways. And in many ways, I will raise him the way that I was raised, except my parents didn't know the Lord. And that was the biggest thing that was missing in my life. So I will be very, very intentional to model a relationship with God before him, to pray with him, to teach him about who God is and how God made him special and unique and treasured and precious. And I will ask him the tough questions. I think there's no way I would have ever told my mom that I was raped. But if she would have asked me if anybody had ever taken advantage of me physically like that, I probably would have told her. She would have asked me why I was drinking all the time. Maybe I would have told her, because I don't feel good inside. So I will ask him the tough questions, and I'm going to try to make sure that he doesn't feel like he needs to protect me. I remember there's a lot of times that I didn't want to tell my mom something because I didn't want to worry her. And so with my stepchildren and with Grayson, I just want to make sure that they know that we're going to be proud of them no matter what. They don't need to try to protect us. We're here to help them. And so I think about those things a lot.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm to the point after our 7th kid, I don't really want to know what they're doing. They're like, hey, I was with my friends last night. I'm like, that's awesome. Hope you had a good time. I told someone the other day, I'm just tired of being a mom, I think. It's exhausting. So, yeah, okay. Last question, and then we'll just open it up if anyone has it. And then we'll go to one other thing. How old are you? I told everyone you were 24. Apparently you're not.
No, I'm 32. I'm 32 now.
Isn't that funny? She looks like she's 12. It's the cutest thing. So I literally told everybody that, and they're like, oh, okay. So, but yeah, this happened quite a while ago then.
Yeah, it was January of the year 2000.
So 15 years ago.
So every January we celebrate my survival, which is like a much more special birthday than my real birthday.
That is awesome. Okay, does anyone have any more questions? No one wrote a lot of questions down. So if there are any questions, you can just
Yeah, any questions? I'm used to them all, so you can ask anything.
Okay.
When you said that you received peace after you had realized that the train went over, did you say that you felt the pain, but the peace came? Did you not feel the pain, or how did that?
She said, when I felt peace after the train had went over me and I was on the side of the railroad tracks, did I feel pain at the same time, or did that go away, or was it, that's really your question, right? I felt total peace. I mean, emotionally, physically, everything just felt like, I don't know, I guess maybe kind of like heaven will feel, I don't know. But I didn't feel the pain at that moment. I felt God more than ever before.
You were still in the center of the track.
No, I wasn't in the center of the track anymore. I had crawled off the track, so I was kind of like laying on these rocks next to the tracks. This is actually a really good picture. So I was like right here.
Was the train still here?
Okay,
Or had it already gone?
so this is good because this is double tracks. So I got off the train that was on these tracks. This is the one that the tracks that I laid on, and then I was sitting on the side over here afterwards.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
Sure, okay. So the double track. So I got off the train that was on these tracks. I laid on these tracks before the other train came, and then I got off the side over here.
So when you laid on the track, were you face up?
No, I was face down. My eyes were closed, my fists were clenched, and I was laying like this with my head in the opposite direction than where the train was coming from. So my body was all the way between the tracks. My head was right here, and my legs were hanging over.
I guess it's not something you really think through.
My head was here, my legs were hanging over. No, thankfully I didn't think through it. Every once in a while I'm like, what would have happened if I did think through it? Like, what if my head was here? You know? I don't know.
No, but even still, when you think of the width of a track, from your head to your leg, doesn't even seem like, I mean, that seems...
It seems too short. Yeah, that's kind of how I thought about that.
Wider than what the width of that track is.
Yeah, but this is just a picture.
No, but you know what I'm saying? Like that, it just seems
Yeah.
so...
You must have been curled up in a little...
No, I was laying
leg
straight.
out. Isn't that amazing?
I mean, the real tracks they're like this,
That's amazing.
you know? So my head and my body fit pretty well between there.
Yeah. We're just so glad you're here. Now, did the train stop? So when they were trying to find you, was there a train there, or it was all cars passed?
It did stop, but it takes a long time to stop
Yeah.
a train, so that's why 33 cars still went over me. Because I didn't lay down until... I did have the awareness to think, I don't want to lay down, and I don't want it to have time to stop before it goes over me.
Yeah.
So I laid down right before, so in that little bit of a way, it was premeditated, but it was still very impulsive in the moment.
Yeah.
So the whole train went like
Not the whole train. When it came to a stop, the train was still above me.
Okay, so it did stop all. Bless your heart.
There's a woman over there with a question.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The question was, did she think about her parents? Like, what were you thinking? Like, my mom's going to kill me.
Yeah. So I did think about my parents and my friends and my nephews who were really little at the time, but I just I was in such a broken place that I remember and I thought so little of myself that I thought they'll be fine, they'll get over it, like they're better off without me. I was believing things like that.
I think it's a matter of believing lies, just believing something that that's why it's so important to fill your mind with the Word of God, because then it takes those lies away.
Is tonight session open for just teenage girls or can teenage boys?
Oh, no, it's for anyone. Anyone, teenagers, college, adults, whoever.
Junior high.
Yeah, and what I thought we'd do tonight, too, is, junior high also, is do like a question and answer for these kids after you share your story, because they probably have more dramatic questions. So.
When you were on the Oprah show, did they restrict you in any way from what you could say?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good
On
question.
the Oprah show, was she restricted on what she could say?
No, I mean, that's something I talked to them about before I went on. The only reason I share this story is to share what God did in my life. There's really no reason to share it otherwise. And so we had a discussion about that before I went on the show, and they were very good not to edit me in any way. They were kind of trying to redirect the conversation several times, but they didn't edit me at all. So I give them a lot of credit for that.
Good. Were you able to share Jesus with Oprah?
I only talk to her on stage. She does things, where she wants it to be a very live interview. When she asks you a question, she wants it to be the very first time.
Okay.
So I only talk to her on stage. So when I shared my story with her, that's the only way, that she would have.
You did a great job, though. You really put the gospel in a really good place. Someone else had a question.
You said that it sounded like you didn't come to know Jesus until after you were in your healing process. Was there at any point when you first were run over by the train and you lost your legs, or you had a near-death experience where you felt the presence of God, or you they talk about seeing a light or anything, were you ever that close to death that you felt yourself slipping away and you had a glimpse of Jesus?
I don't think so. The closest, yeah.
The question was, when she felt that peace, was it like a near-death experience, like she saw a light, or she saw, because you really didn't come to Christ until after that. I would assume that was more just God just drawing you. You knew He was just trying to help you out.
Yeah,
on that.
I feel like him putting his hand on me and protecting me, and him really meeting me on the tracks, giving me that kind of peace that I could have never understood. And hearing the song Amazing Grace was really just him starting to show himself to me in a bigger way than I had ever seen him before. And I think he probably knew that I would look back at that and be like, wow, God was really there. He was really with me. He really cared, enough to come and protect me and be with me in those moments. So I don't feel like I was, able to see Jesus or see heaven or, be right there, even though I was this close to death. But I feel like God was just as close to me.
Have you ever had to speak to the family of somebody who actually committed suicide that was Christian and not Christian, and how would you speak to them differently?
The question is, does she speak to people, like are you saying a non-Christian committed suicide and the Christian is left behind, and how do you deal with that? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, the family that's left behind, do you speak to them differently?
I only have people occasionally come up to me who have lost somebody to suicide. The hardest question I've ever been asked is, why did God save you and not my child?
Yeah. See, because I'm really awesome, that's why.
No, exactly. That's the opposite,
I know,
because
but
I don't
that's a hard
deserve it at
question to
all.
ask.
And it's hard for me to answer your question. It's hard for me to answer their question. Sorry. It's hard for me because, I know that I don't deserve to still be here. And I know that I would have went to hell if I died. So sometimes if somebody asks me, like that, and I'll just tell them what I believe about myself. If they weren't a Christian, I'll be like, well, I think this is what would have happened to me, because that's how I understand it. But I am also always conscious of, how that could be really difficult for somebody. And one of the things Lisa said yesterday is that we all have a chance. Right. We all have a chance to go to heaven, to know God, and this is, you still have a chance, And I had a professor once who lost a daughter to suicide, and he said to me that she was leading such a destructive life that one of the things that he found comfort in was realizing that even losing her to suicide, it was the lesser of two evils. And so I try to share that with people, and I always just try to share my sympathy with them.
I feel your pain. I can't even imagine, because there is that. There's truth, because you want to be truthful to say no if they didn't know Jesus, and but you're also dealing with grieving families.
Right. I mean, even Christian families, if they know that the child is in heaven, it doesn't make it a whole lot easier sometimes. And so for some, I guess, but for many, there's still the same sort of pain. So sometimes I don't want to say but they're in heaven, because it's yeah, I know that. It still hurts,
Exactly. I think salvation for all of us too is just grace. How God saved any of us is so amazing. So I think when we realize that, it's all by Him. So
right.
So who else? Did the first responders get tourniquets on you?
That's a good question. I think that they did. I'm pretty sure that they did. I don't remember a lot from I just remember I wrote about this in the book. I remember being in the ambulance and this one lady, Trudy, holding my hand and just with her like motherly voice telling me, it's going to be okay, it's going to be okay, you're going to be fine. That's all that I remember. Like, I remember them cutting off my clothes, cutting off my coat, and getting in the ambulance and her holding my hand. I don't remember everything else that they did. I almost like was in a zone, you know, like I didn't want to be there. It was worse than laying on the tracks by myself. It felt like, because I was so embarrassed. So I wasn't really like thinking about everything that they were doing. So I'm not sure if they put tourniquets on. I think that they did, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I just wanted to apologize on behalf of that family that actually said that, because I think a lot of times people, we've all got brains, we've all got mouths, but we don't always use our filter. So I sincerely want to, and I am that firefighter who I did that for 32 years, and I have been on several suicides and non-suicides. And every situation is different.
Yeah.
And when you're that person right there in the moment, it's really, really difficult. And as a Christian, I try to empty myself and try to ask the Lord to send the Holy Spirit on my behalf, because I'll mess it up.
Yeah, God, tell me what to say. What does this person need to hear from you?
And there's times that there's nothing that can be said in that moment, where sometimes you just need to reach out and touch somebody to hold them, you know, as they're grieving.
Right.
And so, thank you for sharing your story.
I completely agree. Thank you.
I was more amazed that somebody had the guts to tell you that you would have gone to hell. And I think, and I know that sounds stupid, because most people, I'm pretty bold. I'm not certain. Well, I might have, but maybe not. Probably not. You know what I mean? But it's kind of like, that was a big, but I think it's just a reminder to all of us how important it is to share the truth. Like, because that was something that took you, and even though it probably shocked you, but it kind of snapped you into, well, is that even true?
Yeah.
You know? So sometimes I think it's good to let people know the truth.
It's good to let them know that, but for me, it was very helpful when the other man was so sweet and sensitive and shared the rest of the gospel with me. Like, it would have been better for her to share, you know.
No, she should have said something nicely to you after that. But it's interesting that God used that one little statement that she probably didn't even think any twice about.
God can use anything.
Yeah.
He can use anything, even somebody who's not a believer.
Absolutely. Yes.
How did your friends react?
How'd your friends react? Oh, a lot of people want to know if Kelly was still in your life. So
Kelly is still in my life. My friends were shocked, especially because I was a senior. I, had a lot of friends. A lot of the young girls were like, why would she do that? So that was hard once I realized that I had all these younger girls looking up to me. But my friends that I had really close relationships with, they were just shocked because they never ever thought that I would do that. Honestly, I never ever thought that I would do something like this. So everybody was just shocked, but they were sweet and kind, and they came to visit me a lot, and I don't know, they just loved on me. Kelly is still in my life. She was kind of rocked by this herself. It took her a long time to read the book. She just read it after I got married, actually, a few years after it had come out. So God is really working in her heart and in her life, and I'm glad that we can still be friends. He's really used it, in ways that I never imagined. So
many people. Yes.
Did any of your close friends come to Jesus because of this happening?
Did any of her friends come to Jesus because of this?
None of my friends came to Christ after this happened. None of my really, really close friends, only some of my other friends. But my family did. So that, that makes it more than worth it. Even just for me, it makes it worth it, but my family makes it that much more worth it. So I'm still praying for my friends a lot.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yes. We can't hear you.
I have a friend from childhood, and she committed suicide. But what gives me peace is that God lead during the process. That she changed her life.
I can hardly hear. So what gives you comfort is knowing that maybe in that last minute, is that what you said? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. That's one of the things I do tell people who they feel like they didn't have a relationship with God, they weren't walking with God, and they died because of suicide or something else. We don't know what happens in those last moments. Even when I was like this close to death, I was still really able to think through my life and what was happening. And any person can turn their life to Lord in that last minute, and He will accept them no matter what they've done in their lives. That's not what God wants us to do with their lives, but He offers forgiveness to everyone no matter what, while we're still here.
And Dusty came in the other night too, because he said, Mom, he said, I have a friend at school that his dad was a pastor, and then he went into a depression and he ended up killing himself. And he said, so is he a Christian? And I think the answer is that I think Christians, when you have a relationship with Jesus, I think, you can still have days where you just feel down, or weeks and even months. And some, just like you just have that moment when, and it doesn't mean you don't lose your salvation. It's just sad that they didn't realize they could have an abundant life, or maybe he didn't get help in time, or I don't know how that plays out. But a lot of people think that, if you're a Christian and you commit suicide, then you really weren't a Christian. I don't really think that's true. You can speak to that.
I agree. I agree with that. I think there's no sin that can separate us from God, even suicide. Obviously, it's something, that breaks the heart of God. It's not something He would ever want any one of us to do. But I don't think that if you die because of suicide and you were a Christian, that then you won't go to heaven.
Because you see all through the Bible where there's times where people just walk away for short periods of time, and they could fall into some.
And I think that anybody who attempts suicide is being deceived.
Oh. Rob's calling. No idea what happened. Yeah. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I thought that was off. Hi, honey.
And
Okay.
I can see that when I look back, like how tricked I was, completely tricked into believing that my life wasn't worth living, that everyone was better off without me, that the pain was never going to get better, that I wasn't good enough, I wasn't strong enough, I was believing all of those things. And it's not, you don't feel like you're believing lies, you don't feel like you're being tricked, you don't feel like you're being deceived, you feel like this is the truth, and you're just realizing it. So why do I still need to be here?
Yeah. All right, keep truth in our brains. Thank you so much for coming and being with us. It's been super fun. So you've taught us a lot.
Thank you.
We'll pray. Come back tonight. She'll be sharing her story again tonight at 6 o'clock. We'll have free pizza, so that will be awesome. And let's just pray real quick. God, thank you for this time. Pray for anyone here that doesn't know you, that today would be the day that they would say, Jesus, come in my life and change me. I pray that we all will fill our minds with hopeful things, your word, how you feel about us, that you love us, and that you have a purpose for each one of us. Thank you for saving Kristen. You have a purpose for that. I pray for her ministry, her family, that you would just thank you for shining your light through her and being there for people who have such sad lives. I thank you that you're using her in such mighty ways. And just bless her and her family. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks, sweetie.
Thank you.
He had a choice on how he was going to respond to the rest of his life. And it's the same with you. And don't let Satan win. Honestly, what you need to do is say, let's start a compassion ministry. And what we're going to do, he has 1 billion stars he's in control of. He can deal with your, and that God's saying, I don't want that. I want you to treat me like you would treat your best friend. Those are real feelings that we think we got to keep to ourselves, like, shh, no, God, where we can't. No, He knows.